This baby was found by a millionaire in the middle of the mud, stinking and swarming with flies. But if the scene wasn't already heartbreaking enough, something even worse happened seconds later. Comment what you think is going to happen and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The grey sky poured a thin, steady rain over Chicago, creating a melancholic curtain that seemed to perfectly reflect the mood of Jake. Sitting in his Italian leather armchair in the luxurious office of the mansion he inherited from his parents, the 21-year-old entrepreneur watched the drops run down the panoramic window, forming small rivers that merged and separated on the glass. His hazel eyes, normally alert to business opportunities, now wandered without focus, lost in thoughts that had consumed him for months. The mansion was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock that had belonged to his father. That sound, once comforting, now only amplified the loneliness that suffocated him. The walls filled with expensive paintings and the solid mahogany bookshelves full of unread books seemed to mock him, reminding him that all that luxury did not fill the void that grew in his chest. Jake ran his hand through his dark hair, messing up the always well-groomed strands. He hadn't slept that night, as had often happened since he took over the family's chain of supermarkets. The empire built by his father now weighed on his young shoulders like a cross he hadn't chosen to carry. The endless meetings with executives who treated him with a mixture of condescension and interest, the decisions that affected hundreds of employees, all of this made him feel like an imposter in his own life. He stood up abruptly, his tall figure casting a long shadow on the Persian carpet. He walked to the walk-in closet, and his fingers brushed against the fabric of the burgundy suit, the last piece his father wore before the accident that took both parents. It was the only piece of clothing he hadn't been able to donate, the only one that still held his father's characteristic perfume, mixed with the tobacco smell of the cigars he so enjoyed. Without thinking twice, Jake put on the suit. The fine fabric embraced his shoulders in an almost paternal way, bringing a comfort he hadn't felt in a long time. He grabbed the car keys and left, ignoring the worried looks of the servants who saw him leave without an umbrella or destination. The black Mercedes cut through the wet streets of the city, leaving behind the wealthy neighborhoods and entering increasingly unfamiliar regions. Jake drove aimlessly, just following his instincts, as if something was pulling him away from everything he knew. The paved streets gave way to dirt roads, and the asphalt gave way to the mud that accumulated with the persistent rain. Then that something caught his attention, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement in the middle of a muddy puddle. Jake braked sharply, his heart racing for no reason. He got out of the car, his Italian shoes sinking into the mud, the burgundy suit soaking wet with the rain that was now falling harder. What he saw next paralyzed his entire body. There, partially submerged in the muddy water, was a small bundle that moved weakly. Jake approached, his legs trembling, and his heart almost stopped when he identified what it was, a baby, so small and fragile, covered in mud, with a swollen and red face from crying so much. The crying was so weak that it could barely be heard above the noise of the rain. Flies buzzed around the unprotected little body, landing mercilessly on the delicate skin. The baby barely had the strength to move, its half-closed little eyes showing a pain that no words could describe. Without hesitating for a second, Jake tore off his father's jacket and wrapped the child with all the care he could muster. The fine fabric, which moments before represented status and memory, now served as the only protection for that fragile life. The baby was freezing, its skin bluish, revealing how long it must have been exposed to those inhuman conditions. With trembling hands, Jake tried to wipe the baby's face, revealing a face so innocent that it made his chest ache as if it were being crushed. He ran back to the car, protecting the small bundle against his chest, feeling every weak beat of the child's heart, as if it were his own child. He started the car with one hand, keeping the baby close to his body to try to warm it. His brain screamed contradictory instructions, but his instincts guided him to the nearest hospital. The way seemed endless. Every second was precious, and Jake could feel the baby getting quieter and quieter in his arms. When he finally arrived at the emergency room, his soaked and muddy clothes caused astonishment among the staff. But it was the sight of the small bundle in his arms that mobilized. The entire team, doctors and nurses, rushed to attend to the child, while Jake remained there, paralyzed, watching that small being being rushed to the emergency room. A nurse tried to get him to sit down, asking if he was the father, if he knew what had happened, where the baby came from. Jake just shook his head, unable to form coherent words. His world had changed completely in the last few minutes, and he knew, deep down, that nothing would be the same. The following hours passed, like a confusing blur of medical voices, technical terms, and increasingly serious diagnoses. The baby was severely malnourished, showed signs of previous abuse and an infection that was spreading rapidly through its weakened body. Each new piece of information was like a stab in Jake's heart. Sitting in the waiting room, still wearing his father's soaked suit, now stained with mud and without the jacket, Jake began to understand that his life had found a new purpose. There, in that simple hospital, away from the luxury and comfort he was accustomed to, something inside him changed forever. He didn't know how, he didn't know why, but he was absolutely sure that he couldn't abandon that child. His phone rang, incessantly in his pocket. Probably executives and assistants worried about his absence from important meetings. But for the first time in his life, Jake didn't care about any of that. His eyes were fixed on the door of the ICU, waiting for news, praying to a God in whom he had long since stopped believing. The following days were a constant test for Jake's determination. The public hospital, with its peeling walls and old equipment, became his new home. He slept in uncomfortable plastic chairs, showered in the staff locker room, courtesy of a nurse who took pity on his situation, and ate coffee and snacks from the cafeteria. The baby, which doctors estimated to be about 2 months old, fought bravely for life in the neonatal ICU. Tubes and machines surrounded its small body, making it look even more fragile. Jake spent hours watching it through the glass, his heart tightening with every beep of the machines, every change in the numbers on the monitors that he had already learned to interpret. The calls on his cell phone didn't stop. Regina, his personal assistant for years, left increasingly desperate messages. "Mr. Jake, the meeting with the shareholders. Mr. Jake, the contracts need to be signed. Mr. Jake, your aunt is worried." He answered only the essentials, always in the same way. "I can't come back now." It was on the 4th day that Dr. Miller, the doctor in charge of the case, called Jake for a serious conversation. The small, stuffy office seemed even more claustrophobic with the news to come. "Mr. Jake," the doctor began, adjusting his worn-framed glasses. "We need to discuss some sensitive issues. The baby's condition is very serious. In addition to severe malnutrition and widespread infection, we found evidence of previous neglect. There are old burn marks, possibly from cigarettes, and signs of poorly healed fractures." Each word was like a knife in Jake's chest. His hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly that the knuckles of his fingers were white. The doctor continued, his voice now softer. "We also need to talk about the costs of treatment. I know you have been covering all the extra expenses, but the baby will need specific procedures, imported medications. The public hospital has its limitations." Jake didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone and called his bank manager. In minutes, he transferred a considerable amount to the hospital. "Do whatever it takes, doctor. Money is no problem." But it was. For the first time in his life, Jake began to do the math. The expenses with the hospital were astronomical, and he had practically abandoned the administration of the supermarkets. The company's shares began to fall, and the shareholders were in panic. At night, alone in the waiting room, Jake received increasingly aggressive messages from his family. His Aunt Carol, his father's sister and the company's main shareholder, was especially cruel. "Have you gone mad, throwing away everything your father built because of an abandoned baby? What right do you have to destroy the family's legacy?" The social workers at the hospital began to investigate the child's origin. Through reports from residents of the area where Jake found the baby, they discovered a devastating story. The mother, a young addict who lived in a squat, had traded her own child for some rocks of crack. The baby spent days being cared for by other drug addicts until being abandoned in the mud when it started to cry too much. This revelation broke something inside Jake. He spent the whole night crying, silently in the hospital chapel, holding the rosary he found in his father's jacket pocket, the same one he had used to wrap the baby. How could anyone do that to a defenseless child? The social workers suggested referring the baby for adoption as soon as he recovered. "You have already done a lot," they said. "Now let the system take care of it." But Jake couldn't accept that idea. Every time he looked at that little face through the glass of the ICU, he felt an inexplicable connection. The financial situation began to become unsustainable. The shareholders called an emergency meeting, and Jake was forced to attend. In the company's luxurious office, sitting at the meeting table where his father used to preside, he faced accusing looks and harsh words. "You have two options," declared his Aunt Carol, with her characteristic coldness. "Either you go back to work immediately and forget this madness, or you will be removed from the position of president. We cannot let your emotional instability destroy everything we have built." Jake looked at each face at that table, people he had known since childhood, who frequented his home for dinners and parties. Now he saw only masks of greed and incomprehension. He stood up calmly, took off the jacket he was wearing. No longer his father's, which remained at the hospital, and placed it on the table. "I don't need to choose, I'm out." He left the room, leaving a stunned silence behind. In the elevator, his hands trembled as he typed a message to Regina, asking her to prepare his letter of resignation. He had no idea what he would do next, but he knew he couldn't abandon that baby. Back at the hospital, he found bad news. The child's condition had worsened, and doctors were worried about a possible multiple organ failure. Jake spent the whole night next to the incubator, exceptionally allowed by the team that already knew him well. "You have to fight, little one," he whispered to the baby, his gloved hand gently touching the delicate skin. "I'm not going to give up on you. Never." The next morning, he received a visit from a bailiff. His aunt had obtained an injunction preventing him from using company resources or selling his shares to pay for the baby's treatment. He was officially isolated, without access to the family's assets. That night, Jake returned to the mansion. One last time, he packed a bag with the essentials, took some photographs of his parents and the important documents. He looked one last time at the luxury that surrounded him and felt only emptiness. He left without looking back, taking only what fit in his car. He rented a simple room near the hospital, using his personal savings. The space was smaller than his old walk-in closet, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing something truly important. However, the battle was just beginning, and fate still held painful surprises for Jake and his little protégé. The rented room was small and stuffy, with a single window overlooking a brick wall. Jake woke up startled by the sound of a dripping leak. Another problem for the growing list of worries. His back ached from the thin mattress, but he had no time to think about it. He needed to rush to the hospital. On the way, he stopped at a simple cafe where he was already known. Mrs. Davis, the owner with grey hair and a gentle smile, served him an extra coffee and a grilled cheese. "Today it's on the house, honey. You're too skinny." Jake tried to refuse, but she insisted. It was one of the few gestures of kindness he had received lately. At the hospital, the news wasn't encouraging. The baby had had a difficult night. With fever spikes and seizures, Dr. Miller explained that they would need to try a new antibiotic, more potent and consequently more expensive. Jake swallowed hard. His savings were running out. "How much?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The amount was astronomical. Jake did the math mentally. He would need to sell the car. It was his last asset of value, the only one his aunt hadn't been able to block. Without it, he would have to use public transportation, but there was no choice. While he was signing the papers authorizing the new treatment, a social worker he didn't know approached with a stern look. Her name was Sarah, and her first words were like needles. "Mr. Jake, we need to talk about your situation. You have no legal connection with this child. You are not a relative. You are not a designated responsible party. And now we know that you are financially compromised." Jake felt the blood run cold. He knew this moment would come, but he wasn't prepared. "Furthermore," she continued, consulting a folder, "we received an anonymous tip questioning your motives for so much interest in an abandoned child. You understand that this raises suspicions, don't you?" The insinuation hit him like a slap. Jake felt his face burn with anger and shame. "How can you think I just want to help? This child was dying in the mud." "Precisely," Sarah cut in. "And now she needs a stable environment, a structured family. You are a young, single, unemployed man, living in precarious conditions. What future can you offer?" Her words were technically correct, and that hurt even more. Jake spent the rest of the day in shock, watching the baby fight for life through the glass of the ICU. When night came, he couldn't go home. He sat in the hallway, his back against the cold wall, trying to hold back the tears. That's how Sarah, a nurse on the night shift, found him. She'd worked there for 20 years and had seen it all, but something about Jake's dedication touched her deeply. She sat next to him and offered a glass of water. "You know," she began, her soft voice breaking the silence of the hallway, "in all these years, I've never seen anyone fight so hard for a child they didn't even know. You have a special heart, honey." Jake couldn't take it anymore. The tears he was holding back began to fall, and he told Sarah everything. About his parents, about the loneliness in the mansion, about the emptiness he felt until he found the baby. Sarah listened in silence, just holding his hand. "But now," he concluded, wiping his face, "they're going to take him away from me. And maybe it's even better that way. Just look at me. I couldn't even keep my father's business running." Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. "Jake, you gave up everything to save a life. That's not failure. It's the greatest proof of success there is." The next morning, Jake started looking for work. Any job. He handed out resumes in stores, restaurants, repair shops. His only diploma was in business administration, unfinished, and his only experience was managing the family's supermarket chain. No one seemed interested. After a week of closed doors, he got a job as a stock clerk in a hardware store. The salary was minimum wage, but it was something. In his spare time, he started doing deliveries by bike for an app. He had sold the car to pay for the baby's treatment. His new routines were exhausting. He woke up at 5 in the morning, biked to the store, worked until 2, did deliveries until 7, and then went to the hospital. He got home after midnight, slept a few hours, and started all over again. His room now had an improvised mural with newspaper clippings about child development, tips for baby care, information about adoption. He studied whenever he could, determined to prove that he could be a good father. But fate seemed determined to test his limits. On a particularly hot afternoon, while making a delivery, his bike was stolen. He walked home, exhausted and defeated. When he arrived, he found an eviction notice. He was behind on the rent. Sitting on the narrow bed, looking at the stained ceiling, Jake allowed himself a few moments of despair. He picked up the only photo he had brought of his parents, taken on their last birthday together. "Help me," he whispered to the image. "I don't know what to do anymore." The phone rang, startling him. It was Dr. Miller, his voice tense on the other end of the line. "Jake, you need to come to the hospital now. The baby..." There was a complication. The world seemed to spin. Jake ran out, not caring about the rain that was starting to fall. He didn't have money for a bus, so he ran the miles that separated his room from the hospital, his heart beating so hard it hurt. When he arrived, soaked and panting, he found a full medical team around the incubator. The baby had suffered cardiac arrest and was being resuscitated. Jake fell to his knees in the hallway. His legs couldn't support him anymore. Sarah was there and ran to support him. "Pray with me," she asked, holding his trembling hands. And there in the cold hallway of the hospital, Jake prayed as he had never prayed before. Not for the companies, not for the money, not for the lost status. He prayed for the only thing that mattered, the life of that little child who, unintentionally, had given meaning to his existence. The minutes dragged on like hours as the medical team fought to stabilize the baby. Jake remained on the floor of the hallway, his wet clothes forming a puddle around him, but he didn't care. Sarah continued beside him, murmuring prayers and offering the silent comfort of her presence. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Miller came out of the ICU. His face was tense, marked by tiredness and worry. "We managed to reverse the arrest," he said, "but the situation is critical. The next 24 hours will be decisive." Jake tried to get up, but his legs were shaking so much that Sarah had to help him. Can I see him?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. The doctor hesitated but nodded. 5 minutes, and you need to change first. We have to avoid any risk of contamination." Sarah brought a set of hospital clothes and helped Jake to compose himself. Before entering the ICU, she held his arm. "Talk to him. Babies feel when they are loved." Gowned and sanitized, Jake approached the incubator. The baby was even paler than normal, connected to even more tubes and machines. His little chest rose and fell with the help of the equipment, and the monitors showed weak but constant beats. "Hey, little one," Jake whispered, placing his gloved hand through the opening of the incubator. "You gave me quite a scare, you know, but you're strong, much stronger than me. I need you to keep fighting, okay? Because I love you, and I didn't even know it was possible to love someone so quickly." A tear escaped and rolled down his face, falling on the surgical mask. It was then that he felt it, a soft, almost imperceptible movement. The baby's tiny little finger had moved, brushing his hand. That night, Jake couldn't afford a hotel room, and his own room was locked by the landlord. He ended up sleeping in a chair in the hospital chapel, wrapped in an old blanket that Sarah had gotten. But he couldn't really rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the baby's pale face fighting for life. The next morning, he received 2 visits that would change everything. The first was Sarah, the social worker, accompanied by a well-dressed woman who introduced herself as Dr. Evans from Child Protective Services. "Mr. Jake," Dr. Evans began, her professional tone masking an underlying gentleness, "we have analyzed your case carefully. Your dedication is touching, but we need to think about the best interest of the child. We have a registered family with excellent structure waiting for an adoption. They have the resources to offer the treatment the baby needs." Jake felt as if the floor disappeared under his feet. "Please," he begged, "he's all I have. I'm working, studying about childcare. I can..." "Mr. Jake," Sarah interrupted, softer now, "you are unemployed, without a fixed home, and clearly going through an emotionally unstable moment. How can we ignore that?" Before he could answer, Sarah appeared running down the hallway. "Jake!" "Dr. Miller is calling. The baby. He's reacting." The group ran to the ICU. Through the glass, they could see Dr. Miller examining the baby, who had his eyes open, really open, for the first time in days. His values on the monitors had improved significantly overnight. "It's a real miracle," explained Dr. Miller, coming out to talk to them. "The infection is subsiding. The organs are responding. He is a true warrior." It was at that moment that the second visit arrived. Regina, Jake's former assistant, carrying a thick folder of documents. Her normally composed face showed signs of having cried. "Mr. Jake," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need you to see this. I've spent the last few weeks investigating. There was something wrong in the company's accounts, something your father discovered before the accident." Regina explained that she had found evidence of systematic embezzlement of money, orchestrated by Jake's aunt over years. The accident that killed his parents happened just when his father was about to report the scheme. "Your aunt. She knew. You would never look at the accounting books carefully. You were too young, you trusted her, but when you started selling your shares to pay for the baby's treatment, she panicked. She feared you would discover." Jake listened to everything. In shock, Regina continued, "I brought all the evidence. With this, we can reverse the injunction, recover your control over the company. You can have everything back." The hallway fell silent. Dr. Evans and Sarah watched the scene, realizing that the situation had changed completely. Sarah held Jake's hand, offering silent support. But Jake wasn't looking at the documents, nor at the social workers. His eyes were fixed on the baby through the glass of the ICU, that little life that had transformed his existence completely. "Regina," he said finally, his voice calm and determined, "use this evidence, recover what was stolen, but I don't want the company back. I just want enough to give him a decent life." He pointed to the baby, "and create a foundation to help other abandoned children." He turned to Dr. Evans and Sarah. "I know I don't have a mansion to offer, but I have all the love in the world to give to this child. And now, with the truth coming to light, I can prove that I am fit to be a good father." The baby chose this moment to cry. A strong, healthy cry, very different from the weak moans of the last few days. It was as if he was agreeing, fighting, alongside Jake. The following weeks were a roller coaster of emotions and changes. The investigation into the embezzlement in the company advanced rapidly, thanks to the evidence meticulously gathered by Regina. Jake's aunt, realizing that it would be impossible to cover up her crimes, tried to flee the country, but was apprehended at the airport. The scandal occupied the headlines of local newspapers for days. Jake, however, remained focused on what really mattered. The baby continued to improve every day, exceeding all medical expectations. His little eyes, once so opaque and lifeless, now shone with a vivacity that delighted everyone. He began to gain weight, and his skin acquired a healthier color. "It's impressive," commented Dr. Miller during one of the checkups. "I have never seen such a remarkable recovery. This boy really wants to live." Sarah, who had become a kind of guardian angel for Jake and the baby, smiled whenever she saw them together. "It's the power of love," she said. "Sometimes that's all we need to survive." With the reversal of the injunction and the start of the process of recovering the embezzled funds, Jake was finally able to rent a suitable apartment near the hospital. It was a simple but clean and cozy place, with 2 bedrooms, one for him and another that he began to prepare for the baby, even without being sure if he would get custody. Dr. Evans and Sarah continued to follow the case closely, but their expressions were no longer of disapproval. They observed how Jake transformed every free moment into a learning opportunity. He read books on child development, participated in lectures on first aid for babies, talked to other parents in the pediatric ward to learn from their experiences. "You know," commented Sarah to Dr. Evans one day, while watching Jake gently change the baby's diaper under the supervision of a nurse. In 15 years of social service, I've never seen anyone dedicate themselves so much to learning to be a father. The adoption process, however, would not be easy. Even with his financial situation stabilized, Jake faced resistance from the system. He was too young, single, without experience with children. The hearings with the judge were tense and exhausting. During one of these hearings, something unexpected happened. Regina, who continued to support Jake even after leaving the company, brought a surprise: dozens of letters and testimonies from former employees of the supermarkets, telling how Jake had treated them with humanity and respect, even in the chaotic weeks before his departure. He was always different from the family, testified a former cashier. He knew the name of every employee. He cared about our problems. When my son got sick, he reorganized my schedules so that I could take care of the boy without losing my job. The judge, a man of severe appearance who had already denied several adoption requests, listened to everything carefully. His expression began to soften when Sarah, who had taken a day off to testify, described the nights that Jake spent in the hospital, his tireless dedication, his determination to learn every detail of the baby's care. "Your Honor," she said with tears in her eyes, "in 20 years of nursing, I have never seen more pure and true love. This man doesn't want a baby to fill a void or fulfill a social obligation. He is already a father at heart from the first moment he found this child in the mud." The baby, who was now strong enough to leave the ICU, moved to semi-intensive care. Jake could hold him longer, feed him with a bottle, sing the lullabies that his mother sang to him. In one of those moments, while cradling the little one too, sleep, he began to think of names. "Michael," he whispered, testing how it sounded. The baby opened his eyes and smiled, his first real smile. "You liked it, Michael, like the warrior angel, because you are a warrior, my little one." Mrs. Davis, from the cafe where Jake used to have breakfast, began to appear at the hospital with homemade lunchboxes. "You need to eat right to take care of that little angel," she insisted. Soon, a small support network formed around Jake and Michael. Nurses who gave care tips, other parents who shared experiences, even some former employees of the supermarkets who offered help. One afternoon, while organizing Michael's room, now painted a soft shade of blue, with white clouds on the ceiling, Jake found his father's old jacket, the one he had used to rescue the baby. It was stained with mud, with some parts torn, but he didn't have the courage to throw it away. While he was carefully folding it to store, something fell out of the pocket. An old letter, yellowed by time. It was a letter from his father, written shortly before the accident. Jake had never seen it before. With trembling hands, he began to read. "My son, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. There are wrong things happening in the company, things I can no longer ignore. But more important than that, I need to tell you something I've never been able to express in words. True success is not measured by the money in the bank or the size of the empire we build. It's measured by the good we do, the lives we touch, the love we share. You've always been different from us, Jake. You've always had a heart bigger than the business world. For a long time, I feared that this would make you weak. Now I understand that this is your greatest strength. Don't let the world harden your heart. Don't let money and power become more important than compassion and love. With all my love, your father." Jake let the tears run freely as he pressed the letter against his chest. It was as if his father was there, blessing his choices, confirming that he was on the right path. That night, sitting next to Michael's crib in the hospital, Jake made a silent promise. "I will raise you with all the love I received and all the love I never could give. I will teach you that the true value of a person is not in what they possess, but in the good they do. And together, we will build something much greater than any empire. We will build a family." The day of the final adoption hearing dawned. sunny, as if the sky itself was smiling at Jake and Michael. The little one, now 5 months old, was almost unrecognizable. His cheeks were chubby and rosy, his eyes shone with joy, and his smile lit up any room. Jake adjusted his tie in front of the mirror of the small apartment, his hands trembling slightly. Michael watched everything from his car seat, letting out occasional happy gurgles. Sarah had arrived early to help, bringing a new set of clothes. For the baby, a navy blue jumpsuit and tiny white shoes. "You look handsome, little prince," smiled Sarah, adjusting the hair that was beginning to grow in curls on Michael's head. "The judge won't resist that charm." The courtroom was full that morning. To Jake's surprise, many people had shown up. To support him, Mrs. Davis had closed the cafe for the first time in 15 years to be present, bringing a thermos of coffee and fresh pastries for everyone. Regina was there, elegant as always, carrying a folder with the latest necessary documents. Dr. Miller had taken the morning off to testify, along with several nurses from the hospital. But the biggest surprise came when Jake saw, sitting discreetly, in the back of the courtroom, Mr. Johnson, a gentleman who had worked as a janitor for his family for more than 30 years. In his hands, he held something wrapped in brown paper. Before the hearing began, Mr. Johnson approached Jake timidly. "Young man," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I found this when I was cleaning your father's office after the accident. I kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment." It was a photo album. Jake opened it carefully and felt his heart squeeze. They were photos of him as a baby, in his parents' arms. In one of them, particularly touching, his father held him in exactly the same way that he now held Michael. "Your father would be the first to support your decision," whispered Mr. Johnson. "He always said you had a different heart." The hearing began promptly at 10 o'clock. The judge, Dr. Thompson, was known for his strictness in adoption cases. His face remained impassive as he listened to the testimonies, first the social workers, then the doctors, nurses, and witnesses. Dr. Evans, who had initially been against the adoption, was now one of Jake's biggest supporters. "Your Honor," she declared with conviction, "in 20 years of career, I have never witnessed equal dedication. Mr. Jake not only saved this child's life, he transformed his own life to become the father that Michael needs." Sarah complimented, presenting detailed reports of the home visits. "The environment is simple, but impeccably organized and adapted to the baby's needs." Mr. Jake took courses in first aid, child development, and even cooking to prepare natural baby food. Dr. Miller spoke about Michael's miraculous recovery. "I have no doubt that Mr. Jake's love and dedication were fundamental to this child's survival. The bond between them is something that medicine cannot explain, but that we all witness daily in the hospital." Sarah, with tears in her eyes, told about the nights she found Jake sleeping sitting next to the incubator, about how he memorized every medication and procedure, about how he learned to interpret every little sign that Michael gave. Finally, it was Jake's turn to speak. He stood up, holding Michael in his arms, and faced the judge with a mixture of fear and determination. "Your Honor," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "when I found Michael on that dirt road, I thought I was saving a life. I didn't realize that, in fact, he was saving mine. I had everything that money could buy, but my life was empty. Michael taught me what true love is. He showed me that wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts." Michael chose this moment to grab Jake's tie with his chubby little hand, provoking smiles in the court. Jake continued, with tears in his eyes, "I can't promise we'll be rich. I can't promise a mansion or luxury cars, but I can promise unconditional love, absolute dedication, and the certainty that every day of my life will be dedicated to making this boy happy." The judge, Dr. Thompson, adjusted his glasses and observed the scene for long moments. His face, normally severe, softened when Michael let out a contagious giggle. "In 30 years of magistracy," he began, "I have learned to recognize when a family is true. It is not the blood ties that make a family, but the ties of the heart. And here in this court, I see one of the strongest ties I have ever witnessed." The judge paused, a small smile appearing on his lips. "It is with great satisfaction that I grant the adoption petition. From this moment on, Michael is officially your son, Mr. Jake." The room exploded in applause and tears of joy. Mrs. Davis hugged Sarah, who was crying openly. Regina smiled, thinking about how life takes extraordinary turns. Dr. Miller shook hands with Mr. Johnson, both moved by the moment. But Jake barely noticed the commotion around him. His whole world was concentrated on the little being in his arms, who looked at him with bright eyes of love. "Michael," he whispered, "now we are officially a family." Weeks later, Jake organized a small celebration in the apartment. The place was decorated with blue and white balloons, and Mrs. Davis had prepared a simple but delicious buffet. On the shoe wall of the living room, a new photo stood out, Jake and Michael in court, at the exact moment when the judge proclaimed the adoption. Next to that photo, in a special frame, was his father's letter and an old family photo. It was a way to keep alive the memory of the grandparents that Michael would never know, but whose love, in some way, had guided Jake to that moment. The old mansion of Jake's parents was sold, and with the money recovered from the embezzlement, he established a foundation in Michael's name, dedicated to helping abandoned children and families in the process of adoption. The first project of the foundation was the renovation of the pediatric ward of the hospital where Michael recovered. Sarah was appointed coordinator of the foundation, and Regina agreed to take care of the administrative part. Together, they began to make a difference in the lives of other children who, like Michael, needed only a chance and a lot of love. As for Jake, he never returned to the world of big business. He preferred to open a small store of natural products for babies, where he could work keeping Michael close. The car seat had a special place on the counter from where he charmed customers with his irresistible smile. Every morning before opening the store, Jake and Michael paid a visit to Mrs. Davis's cafe. She always saved the best pastry for her unofficial grandson, as she affectionately called Michael. On one of those mornings, while watching Michael play with a butterfly that landed on his nose, Jake realized a profound truth. Sometimes we need to lose everything we thought was important to find what really matters. His heart overflowed with gratitude for that rainy morning that changed his life forever. And so, in that small store of natural products, between baby smiles and conversations with customers, Jake found something that all the money in the world could not buy: true happiness. Michael would grow up knowing that he was chosen by love, that his story began with an act of compassion, and that sometimes the greatest miracles happen in the most unexpected moments. Jake's father's burgundy suit, the one he had used to rescue Michael, was kept in a special box, a tangible reminder of the day when fate transformed two lonely hearts into a family. And whenever Michael asked about his story, Jake told with a pride how a baby abandoned in the mud taught a lonely millionaire the true meaning of wealth.